Hello, Canada Files viewers. This is Aiden Jonah, editor-in-chief of the Canada Files. I'm speaking with William Ging Wee Dere. He is the author of the award-winning Being Chinese in Canada: The Struggle for Identity, Redress, and Belonging. He was a political organizer and leading activist in the two-decade movement for redress of the Chinese Head Tax and Exclusion Act, and he's a member of the Progressive Chinese of Quebec. William, thanks for joining the Canada Files.
My pleasure.
Right. So, well, unfortunately, what we're talking about isn't such a pleasure. I think, as we both are well aware, there's two Chinese community organizations in Quebec that have been under major fire, and so that's the situation I'm looking to speak to you all about. So, there's two groups now. It's the Chinese Family Service of Greater Montreal and the Centre Sino-Quebec. So they announced on December 1st intent to pursue legal action against the RCMP, that is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, if they didn't get an apology within 2 weeks. So for those who wouldn't be familiar with this situation, which unfortunately I would say is actually many in this country, what accusations provoked this announcement from these organizations, and what evidence was attached to the accusations that these community organizations have very fiercely opposed?
Okay, let me give you the context in which all of these accusations, and I would have to add false accusations against these two organizations here in Quebec. They're the only two social service organizations in Quebec, and the Chinese Canadian, or the Sino-Canadian, Sino-Quebecois community has spent the last 50 years to build up these two organizations in order to provide essential vital services to the community. So the context in 2023 is the atmosphere of xenophobia, Chinese interference, Chinese transnational regression or repression, I should say, which the RCMP has been putting out. And so within this atmosphere, the RCMP issue some press statements to the media accusing the CFS, Chinese Family Service, and SQ, Sino-Quebec, of being Chinese police stations without any evidence whatsoever. It's based purely on rumors started by a Spanish organization, anti-China organization, that said China has whatever hundreds of police stations around the world to repress its citizens and non-citizens. And so the RCMP is playing into that hype. And so the media has been putting the CFS and the SQ on trial ever since. It's a trial by, I guess, public relations. And so the consequences of that is very drastic. Funding was immediately cut off by the Quebec government on French integration, French language courses for new immigrants coming to Quebec, funding for employment services, for elderly services, for summer programs, all the essential funding, all the essential services that cater to the Chinese community here in Quebec, in Montreal mainly, have been drastically reduced. And now the CFS is in danger of losing the building that they raised so much funds to purchase because the bank is refusing to renew its mortgage. And so if they don't raise $1.7 million by next March, the bank will probably just foreclose on and not renew the mortgage. And so that's a drastic state of affairs facing the CFS, not just the CFS, but the entire Sino-Quebecois community here in Quebec. And so this is why we're raising funds to support them. We're soliciting support right across Canada. and this is why the CFS has launched this potential lawsuit against the RCMP.
You hit on what I was going to ask in the second question, so let's hop on to the next. So we're past the 2-week deadline announced by the two Chinese community organizations in Quebec for an apology from the RCMP. What exactly has been the RCMP response, if they've provided any?
Okay, technically the demand letter was to the Attorney General of Canada, I think. Let me just have a look at the letter itself. Yes, it was addressed to the Attorney General of Canada, which is responsible for the RCMP. The only thing that I've seen so far is that they acknowledged the receipt of this letter, but I have not been informed of any other responses from the Attorney General or from the RCMP.
Right. So in that case, so now with the Attorney General of Canada versus the RCMP itself, these organizations obviously they made a specific threat that they would pursue legal action if their desired apology didn't come along. So do you think they're going to pursue that now? Is there going to be a waiting game here? What's your insights at the moment?
Okay, well, the legal action against the RCMP is for defamation. Defamation means that they slandered the Chinese Family Service in Sino Quebec with all kinds of false accusations, and by doing so, they have damaged organizationally and reputationally the work of the Chinese Family Service. And so the damage is quite substantial, including the potential loss of the building that they are in. And so the legal demand is for damages of $2.5 million at the minimum. It could be a lot more once all the damages are tabulated. But the letter of demand is for $2.5 million for defamation and for damage to the work of the Chinese Family Service. And I think we have to pursue it in order to gain justice, because this is the pattern of the RCMP throughout its history. They have no evidence, so what they do is they sit on the case. They said the case is still open, even though they came out during the summer saying that they put a stop to all illegal activities and they've closed down all the police stations across Canada without any evidence of what these illegal activities are, and without evidence of having police stations. So they have this contradictory statement saying that they've closed all these illegal activities in police stations, but the investigation continues. And so I think, this is their tactic. The investigation continues until they can completely close down the social service organizations. And so the law case is, I think, part and parcel of the fight back of the Chinese community here in Quebec and in Canada against this political harassment, against this witch hunt against that's being waged against the Chinese community here in Canada and Quebec.
Right. So let's talk about McCarthyism and in the broader front of things. You have this, obviously, that we've both been keeping an eye on for a long time. That is one Canadian quote-unquote reporter, Sam Cooper, who admitted his sources mainly come from RCMP, CSIS, DEA, U.S. National Security Community. So this guy's sources mainly come from the intelligence community. Now he's already calling to crack down on the ability of Chinese Canadian organizations to sue the RCMP in normal courts and create a quote-unquote national security court to hear such cases. How do you respond to that? I think I know how you will, but for the audience.
Okay, before I get onto Cooper, I just want to say a couple of other things. 2023 has been a very difficult year for the Chinese Canadian community because of all of these charges, innuendos, and accusations and allegations and whatever. And Cooper is quite instrumental in propagating these things. 2023 is the 100th anniversary of the passing of the Chinese Exclusion Act. So this latest attack by the Canadian government and its security forces is setting back the gains for equality and democratic rights of the Chinese Canadian community, for which we've worked for so hard over the last 100 years. So 2023 is a difficult year. Despite that, we are starting to fight back. We've formed this coalition, to save the two institutions. We've collected 400 signatures to the declaration we passed to various individuals and organizations. We received support from the Canadian Race Relations Foundation, the Action Chinese Canadian Together Foundation, the Coalition Against Anti-Asian Racism Canada, the Quebec Green Party, and the Quebec Ligue des Droits et Libertés, which is the civil rights organization in Quebec. We're calling on other civil rights organizations across Canada to speak out, because they've been completely silent so far against this attack on the Chinese Canadian community. So we're fighting back. Senators Wu and Senator O organized a commemoration of the Chinese Exclusion Act in Ottawa. We had a rally on Parliament Hill, where 2,000 Chinese Canadians came out to demand our democratic rights of voting for whomever we wish to vote for. Han Dong, the MP, has launched a lawsuit against Cooper and his former employer, Global News, for defamation and slander. And so this shows how our community is starting to fight back. And I think Cooper himself is also doubling down on his anti-China efforts. I don't know what circumstances happened that forced him to leave Global News, but now he's a freelancer, continuing his work as a self-appointed mouthpiece for the Canadian security establishment. And I just want to say that David Morrison, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, testified in the House Committee on Foreign Interference. And he said, and he said something that was quite profound. He said, intelligence is not truth. It is often used to influence policy. And I think this is what's been happening. Intelligence is not truth, but the security establishment is using mouthpieces like Cooper to spread all these rumors and targeting, and I would have to say they're targeting specifically the Chinese Canadian community, because in the past we have been easy to pick on, but I don't think we are anymore. We're starting to fight back. I was part of the redress movement for over 20 years, and we fought 20 years to get an apology and a partial redress from the Canadian government. And I think we're starting to wake up and to fight back against all of these slanders against our community, and especially against our community's social service organizations.
Certainly, and I think one of the interesting things, we talk about Cooper, what he says in his sources and so forth, and the Canada posted about this yesterday, is he's become quite animated on the Palestine front against Palestine liberation protesters. This man has called for anti-racketeering laws to target Palestine protesters, just like they've been in the U.S. Those RICO laws have been used to really viciously target protesters against Cop City. And now he's talking about people needing to be accountable for university students' education. And this all comes with the Zionist MPs, including Anthony Housefather in Canada, now calling for, they're now trying to have these show trials in Parliament committee to force these university presidents to crack down on Palestine organizing. I mention that because what's interesting is that because the Chinese Canadian community was primarily the first to be targeted and has been targeted the most harshly because unfortunately it doesn't have as much support as the Palestine liberation cause does. But do you think there's common ground to be found now that the state is really escalating its McCarthyite attacks also against those in solidarity with Palestine?
Oh yes, definitely, and that's why there's so many people in the Chinese community who have expressed their solidarity with the struggle of the Palestinian people. Many have shown up at rallies, demonstrations, and voiced their support. Because I have to say, the politics of Cooper, Housefather, and all these, they represent the extreme right of Canadian politics. And to them, I guess Israel is the promised land, but Israel is also an extremist nation. It has no remorse, has no sympathy or empathy for the plight of the Palestinian people. In the same way that apartheid South Africa had respect for the indigenous African people, and I was part of the support movement, for the liberation of South Africa. I'm still part of the support movement for the liberation of Palestine. It will be a lot more difficult struggle to gain the liberation of Palestine because the entire West, is behind Israel and with all the armaments, bombs, and airplanes and so on. And so it will be a difficult struggle, but the struggle of the Palestinian people, it's something that has to be won. For the sake of humanity, for the progress of humanity, that struggle has to be won.
So I think to kind of wrap these things through, and again, this is where the McCarthyism faced by both the Chinese Canadian community and the Palestinian Canadian community really do come together, is when Cooper makes these calls, and I emphasize again who Cooper's main sources are, really is the intelligence community, North American intelligence community. Do you think Cooper's calls indicate anxiety within the Canadian intelligence community about its ability to keep cracking down on the Chinese Canadian community? And I'm going back to his calls for the national security corps.
Well, this testimony from by David Morrison, still rings fresh in my mind, that intelligence is not truth. And so you can fabricate any kind of intelligence they want by the intelligence establishment. And there's no accountability because they don't have to tell you where the intelligence came from. It could have just come from the imagination of certain agents or the leadership of CSIS, RCMP, and the other establishment. So they are doubling down because they're going to make it more and more difficult. They have a certain ideology that they want to project and they want to maintain. Given from my understanding of the redress movement and how I dealt with various levels of government during those 20 years, I know that politicians come and go, but the bureaucracy stays. And within the bureaucracy, you have entrenched ideologues. And these are the entrenched ideologues within the security bureaucracy. And these are people that have to justify their positions, they have to maintain their jobs, and by doing so, they can hide the truth, but at the same time, influence people. And now they are on an offensive. They put Justin Trudeau on the defensive, saying that he's not acting on all these intelligence, whatever gathering that show that China is the greatest menace to humanity, and also that the pro-Palestinian demonstrators are agents of Hamas, and so on and so forth. And so they can say all these things, and you have people like Cooper who would repeat them in the media as if it's the gospel truth, which it isn't, because intelligence is not truth.
Yes. So, William, I want to thank you for speaking with the Canada Files, and I want to ask you if there's one thing, a last message you'd want to leave the audience with about the situation of these community organizations in Quebec, and perhaps what people could do to help.
Okay, like I said, I'm calling on all fair-minded and justice-minded Canadians, civil liberties organizations right across Canada to come out to voice their support for the Chinese Family Service of Greater Montreal and Centre Quebec in their fight for their existence, in the fight to maintain services, vital, essential services for the Chinese community here in Quebec, and for other communities right across Canada as well. So we are asking you for your support. Please voice your support and take a stand to defend the democratic rights of Chinese Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was William Dere.